Detective James Mercer stared at the pile of unsolved case files stacked on his desk. The fluorescent lights of the Metro Police Department buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his tired face. 3 years on the force and nothing to show for it but a growing reputation as a mediocre cop who couldn't close important cases. The morning newspaper sat beside his coffee mug, the headline about the department's recent successes featuring everyone but him. "Mercer, my office now." Captain Wilson's voice boomed across the bullpen. James sighed, straightening his tie before walking the long path between desks. Every step felt like a walk of shame, with sideways glances from colleagues who had outpaced him in promotions and recognition. Captain Wilson didn't offer him a seat. "The West Side robbery case. Where are we?" "Still following leads, sir. The witness statements are contradictory and it's been 3 weeks, Mercer. Commissioner's breathing down my neck about clearance rates." Wilson tossed a folder across the desk. "Davies and Thompson closed 3 cases while you're still following leads. I need results, not excuses." "Yes, sir. One more thing." Wilson's voice lowered. "Internal Affairs is sending someone to review our department practices. Some complaint about racial bias in arrests." James nodded, feeling the weight of yet another pressure. Back at his desk, he flipped through the case files with growing frustration. His phone buzzed with a text from his ex-wife, reminding him about late child support. The walls felt like they were closing in. Across town, FBI agent Anthony Richards sat in his modest apartment reviewing his new identity. After 12 years with the Bureau, this deep cover assignment represented the most challenging case of his career. The wall of his living room displayed photos and notes detailing a troubling pattern. The Metro Police Department had arrest rates for black citizens 3 times higher than demographics would suggest, with numerous complaints about planted evidence and coerced confessions. Anthony adjusted his watch, which contained a hidden recording device. His phone buzzed with a message from his handler, Special Agent Lee. "Cover identity secure. Remember, no contact unless emergency protocols activated." Anthony had spent weeks building his backstory as Michael Taylor, a small business owner who recently moved to town to open a community center in the predominantly Black Oak Park neighborhood. His apartment walls were thin enough to hear his neighbors arguing next door, far from the comfortable home he owned in Virginia. But the sacrifice was necessary. 3 officers had died in suspicious circumstances after filing complaints against the department. Someone was protecting corruption from within. The next morning, Anthony opened his new community center. He hung a simple sign reading Oak Park Community Resources and arranged the secondhand furniture in the front room. The location was strategic, 2 blocks from where most of the questionable arrests had occurred in a neighborhood that distrusted police with good reason. "You the new guy taking over this place?" A tall man with gray speckled dreadlocks peered through the doorway. "That's right, Michael Taylor." Anthony extended his hand, remembering to use his cover name, Walter Green. "I run the barbershop next door." The handshake was firm but cautious. "What's your angle?" "People come to this neighborhood with all kinds of promises." Anthony gestured around the sparse room. "No angle. Just a place for kids to do homework after school. Job application help. Community meetings. Whatever folks need." Walter studied him with experienced eyes. "We'll see. This neighborhood's seen plenty of people come and go." Over the next few weeks, Anthony methodically built his cover. He hosted resume workshops arranged for donated computers and stayed late helping teenagers with homework, all while gathering intelligence. Each night, he transmitted encrypted data back to FBI headquarters, patterns of patrol cars, officer names, incident reports gathered from conversations with locals. One evening, as Anthony locked up, a police cruiser rolled to a stop outside. His muscles tensed, but he maintained his practiced calm as Officer Brian Davis approached. "This your place?" Davis asked, flashlight beam sweeping across the community center sign. "Yes, sir. Just closing up for the night, ID." The request wasn't friendly. Anthony handed over his carefully crafted fake driver's license. "You know we've had drug activity reported in this area." It wasn't a question. "I wouldn't know about that. Just trying to give the kids a safe place." Officer Davis handed back the ID. "We'll be keeping an eye on this place. These buildings have a way of becoming fronts for all kinds of activity." After the cruiser pulled away, Anthony made a mental note of the officer's badge number. The interaction wasn't surprising. Just another example of the harassment locals had described. Meanwhile, across town, Detective Mercer stared at his reflection in his bathroom mirror. Another day without progress on his cases. The department newsletter had featured Davies again for solving a string of burglaries. His captain's words echoed in his mind. "I need a detective who can close cases, not make excuses." His phone rang. His partner, Detective Ray Thomas. "Turn on Channel 8. There's been a break-in at Councilman Howard's mansion. Art pieces, jewelry, over $1 million in losses." James's heart raced as he flipped on the television. Howard was the city's biggest political donor, chairman of the police funding committee. This was the kind of high-profile case that made careers. The reporter was already on scene, the mansion's grand entrance visible behind yellow police tape. "All units available are responding," Ray continued. "Captain wants us there now." "On my way." For the first time in months, James felt a surge of hope. This was his chance. The Howard mansion was buzzing with activity when James arrived. Crime scene technicians dusted for prints while uniformed officers took statements. Councilman Howard, a tall man with silver hair, was gesturing dramatically as he spoke to the captain. "Irreplaceable. A Monet. Family heirlooms from 3 generations." Captain Wilson spotted James. "Mercer, your lead on this. I want updates every 3 hours." James nodded, surprised by the assignment. "Yes, sir. Don't mess this up," Wilson added quietly. "The commissioner is watching this one personally." The pressure was immense, but so was the opportunity. As James examined the broken glass door at the rear of the mansion, he realized this case would define his career. Either he would solve it and become the department star, or fail and likely be moved to traffic duty. There was no middle ground. By morning, the case had made national news. James had barely slept, reviewing security footage and witness statements. The break-in had been sophisticated. Security system disabled, cameras avoided, alarm code somehow bypassed. "Detective." The crime scene technician handed him a report. "We found partial prints on the window frame. Not enough for identification." James flipped through the sparse evidence with growing frustration. Nothing substantial. Nothing he could use to quickly solve the case. The media was camped outside, waiting for updates he didn't have. "Sir, we canvassed the area." A young officer approached with a notepad. Neighbor reported seeing a black male around 6 feet tall, walking past the property repeatedly in the days before the robbery. "Seemed to be watching the house." James perked up. "Any description?" "Vehicle. Baseball cap, dark jacket." "No vehicle spotted. It was thin, but it was something." As James headed back to the station to organize the investigation, his mind raced with possibilities. The case needed a breakthrough, and he needed it quickly. At the community center, Anthony was unaware of the robbery that had occurred across town. He was focused on his primary mission, documenting police misconduct and identifying the officers involved in the pattern of civil rights violations. "Mr. Taylor?" A teenage boy poked his head in the door. "Can you help me with this job application?" "Sure thing, Dion." Anthony cleared space at the front desk, setting aside the community complaint forms he'd been reviewing. As they worked on the application, Anthony noticed a police cruiser passing by for the 3rd time that hour. The increased police presence in the neighborhood hadn't escaped his attention. His FBI training told him something had changed, but he couldn't determine what. That evening, after closing the center, Anthony took his usual route home, stopping at a corner store for groceries. As he paid for his items, the store owner nodded toward the television mounted in the corner. "Big robbery at the rich man's house. Cops all over the place now." Anthony glanced at the screen showing aerial footage of an impressive mansion surrounded by police vehicles. The scrolling headline read, $1 million heist at Councilman Howard's estate. "They'll probably come around here hassling people who had nothing to do with it," the store owner continued. "Always do." Anthony made a mental note to look into this development. High-profile crimes often increased pressure on police departments, which sometimes led to corner cutting and civil rights violations. Exactly what he was there to investigate. Little did Anthony know that across town, Detective Mercer was staring at a bulletin board of evidence, his career hanging in the balance, and that their paths were about to collide in ways neither could imagine. 3 days after the Howard Mansion robbery, Detective James Mercer sat at his desk surrounded by coffee cups and fast food wrappers. The pressure was mounting. Every morning, Captain Wilson demanded updates. Every evening, the local news questioned the department's progress. The city was watching, and James felt the weight of their expectations crushing him. Anything new? Detective Ray Thomas dropped a folder on his desk. James shook his head. Security cameras disabled. Alarm system bypassed by someone who knew the code. Professional job. Well, you better find something fast. The commissioner called Wilson twice today. James rubbed his tired eyes. The neighbor's report about a black man observing the house remained their only lead, but it had led nowhere. No clear description. No evidence connecting anyone to the crime scene. Nothing that would hold up. His phone rang. The crime lab, Detective Mercer. We found something on the grounds. A receipt from a corner store in Oak Park, dated 2 days before the robbery. James felt a surge of hope. Address? Martin's Corner Market on Jefferson Street, Oak Park. The predominantly black neighborhood that had been the center of several recent complaints about police conduct. James grabbed his jacket. I've got a lead, he told Ray as he headed for the door. The corner store was small, with bars on the windows and flickering fluorescent lights. The owner, a middle-aged man with graying hair, looked up cautiously as James showed his badge. Police been around here plenty this week. What now? James showed him the receipt. Need to see your security footage from this date. Camera's been broken for months, the owner replied. City keeps raising my taxes but can't fix the crime around here, so what's the point? Anyone remember who made this purchase? James held up the bagged receipt. The owner shrugged. Hundreds of people come through every day. James felt his lead slipping away. Then he spotted a community bulletin board near the register. Among the flyers for church events and babysitting services was a simple announcement. Oak Park Community Resources Center, now open. What's this place? James asked, pointing to the flyer. New guy opened it up a few weeks back. Helping kids with homework, job applications, that sort of thing. The owner's tone remained guarded. This new guy, what's his name? Goes by Michael Taylor. Keeps to himself mostly. James took the flyer. Where exactly is this place? 2 blocks away, the community center was quiet. Through the window, James could see a tall black man helping a teenager with what looked like schoolwork. Something about the scene made James pause. The man moved with a confidence that seemed out of place for a neighborhood nonprofit worker. Back in his car, James ran a quick background check on Michael Taylor. The results came back surprisingly thin. Business license filed 2 months ago. Apartment lease signed around the same time. No criminal record. No social media presence. No history in the city before that. It was too clean. Too perfect. In James's experience, everyone had some kind of history, some kind of digital footprint. A real person left marks on the world. That night, James added Michael Taylor's name to his investigation board. The community center was only 4 miles from the Howard mansion. The timing of Taylor's arrival in the city coincided with the planning phase for a sophisticated robbery. And the receipt found at the scene came from a store near Taylor's center. It wasn't evidence, not yet. But it was a thread to pull. The next morning, James parked his unmarked car across from the community center. He watched as Taylor unlocked the doors, arranged chairs, and greeted neighborhood residents with easy familiarity. Everything looked normal on the surface, but James had built enough cases to know that appearances could be deceiving. When Taylor left for lunch, James followed at a distance. The man bought a sandwich from a deli, chatted with the owner, then walked to a small park where he ate alone on a bench. Nothing suspicious. Yet something about Taylor's awareness, the way he casually scanned his surroundings, struck James as professional, trained. James decided to dig deeper. He requested utility records for Taylor's apartment and business, credit checks, and phone records. Each query returned minimal information. Taylor paid bills on time, made few calls, used cash for most transactions. Meanwhile, the press continued hounding the department about the Howard robbery. The commissioner had called a press conference for the following week, expecting progress to report. What have you got, Mercer? Captain Wilson demanded during their daily briefing. I'm following a promising lead, sir. A suspect who recently arrived in town operating near where evidence was found. You have evidence linking them to the scene? Not yet, but the timing is suspicious, and timing? Wilson interrupted. That's all you have after a week, timing? James felt his face flush with embarrassment. Sir, if I could just have a few more days. The commissioner is breathing down my neck. This department needs a win, Mercer. Either make progress or I'll reassign the case. The threat was clear. James had invested everything in this investigation. If he lost the case, his career would never recover. That night, James made a decision that would change everything. He drafted a press release naming Michael Taylor as a person of interest in the Howard robbery. Not a formal accusation, but enough to justify increased surveillance, enough to buy time. With trembling hands, he emailed it to the department's press office for morning release. Across town, Anthony Richards, known to the community as Michael Taylor, was unaware of the storm about to break. He secured his hidden recording devices and encrypted the day's intelligence about police patrol patterns in Oak Park. His investigation had documented multiple instances of questionable stops and searches, mostly of young black men, but he hadn't yet identified the officers orchestrating the broader pattern of misconduct. Anthony's FBI handler had warned him to maintain a low profile, especially with Internal Affairs now officially reviewing department practices. But his cover as a community center director required public interaction. It was a calculated risk. The next morning, as Anthony walked to the community center, he noticed increased police presence in the neighborhood. 2 cruisers passed him slowly. An unmarked car was parked across from the center. His phone buzzed with a text from Walter, the barbershop owner. "You seen the news?" Anthony hadn't. He ducked into a cafe and froze when he saw the television screen. His cover photo was being displayed next to the headline, "Person of Interest Named in Howard Mansion Heist." The news anchor's voice cut through the cafe chatter. Police sources have named Michael Taylor, who recently opened a community center in Oak Park, as a person of interest in the $1 million robbery at Councilman Howard's estate. Taylor, who moved to the city just months ago, has no prior criminal record, but police say evidence connects him to the scene. Anthony's mind raced. His cover was compromised, but not in a way he had anticipated. He couldn't break cover without endangering the entire corruption investigation. Years of work by the FBI would be lost, but allowing himself to become the focus of a high-profile robbery investigation created enormous complications. He slipped out of the cafe and called his handler using the emergency protocol. "I've been compromised," he said quietly, walking briskly away from the center. "We saw the news," his handler replied. "This is unexpected. What evidence could they possibly have?" "None. I was nowhere near that mansion. This could work to our advantage. Stay in character. If they're manufacturing evidence against an innocent man, it fits the pattern we're investigating. Document everything." Anthony ended the call, knowing his handler was right. This development, while dangerous, provided a first-hand look at exactly the kind of misconduct the FBI was investigating. But it also put him directly in the crosshairs of a department desperate for a victory. When he arrived at the community center, reporters were already waiting. Camera lights flashed as he approached the door. "Mr. Taylor, did you rob Councilman Howard's mansion? How long have you been planning this heist?" "Is the community center a front for criminal activity?" Anthony maintained his cover identity perfectly. "These allegations are completely false. I've never been to Councilman Howard's home. I'm here to help this community, not harm anyone." Inside, his phone rang constantly with calls from concerned community members. Walter from the barbershop came over immediately. "This is some bullshit," Walter said, closing the door against the press outside. "They're always quick to blame someone from this neighborhood." "I appreciate your support," Anthony replied, genuine in his gratitude while maintaining his role. "You need a lawyer," Walter insisted. "I know someone good. I'll be fine. Truth will come out." But Anthony knew the situation was far more complicated than innocent versus guilty. He was now caught between his FBI mission and a detective desperate enough to publicly name a suspect without evidence. Across town, Detective James Mercer watched the morning news with mixed emotions. The press had run with his release, giving it more prominence than he had anticipated. His phone had been ringing all morning, colleagues congratulating him on identifying a suspect, reporters seeking additional details. For the first time in years, people were saying his name with respect. Captain Wilson had called, his tone notably warmer. "Good work getting ahead of this, Mercer. The commissioner is pleased we have a lead. Make sure you nail this down tight." But beneath the pride lurked doubt. The evidence connecting Taylor to the scene was circumstantial at best, a receipt that could have been dropped by anyone, a coincidence of timing. James had justified the press release as an investigative tactic, but deep down he knew he had acted out of desperation. Now there was no turning back. His reputation, his career, perhaps his entire future rested on proving Michael Taylor was the burglar. The alternative, admitting he had publicly targeted an innocent man, was unthinkable. That afternoon, James obtained a warrant to search Taylor's apartment and the community center. The judge had barely glanced at the thin evidence before signing. The robbery was high profile and everyone wanted it solved. James assembled a team for the search. As they approached the community center, local residents gathered, many filming with their phones. The scene was tense. "Michael Taylor," James announced formally at the door. "I have a warrant to search these premises in connection with the robbery at the Howard residence." Anthony stood aside, his face calm. "I have nothing to hide, Detective." The search was thorough but yielded nothing. No stolen artwork, no jewelry, no evidence connecting Taylor to the crime. The same was true at his apartment. Modest furnishings, minimal possessions, nothing suspicious. James felt the case slipping away, along with his newfound reputation. But then in the back of Taylor's closet, an officer found a small box containing lock-picking tools. "Care to explain these?" James held up the box triumphantly. Anthony didn't flinch. "I teach a home security workshop at the center. Showing people how locks work helps them understand how to protect their homes better." It was a plausible explanation, but James seized on the discovery. By evening, the news was reporting that burglary tools had been found in Taylor's possession. The story was growing, taking on a life of its own. What James couldn't know, was that every interaction was being meticulously documented by Anthony's hidden recording devices. Each overreach, each mischaracterization, each procedural shortcut was being compiled as evidence not of a robbery, but of a police department willing to target an innocent man to close a high-profile case. As darkness fell, both men lay awake in their beds contemplating their next moves in a chess game where the stakes couldn't be higher. For James, it was his career and reputation. For Anthony, it was both his mission and potentially his life if his true identity were discovered by corrupt officers within the department. Neither man could guess how their collision course would ultimately transform not just their own lives, but the entire Metro Police Department. The morning news showed Detective James Mercer walking confidently into police headquarters. The camera followed him through the lobby as officers nodded with newfound respect. 1 week after naming Michael Taylor as a person of interest, James had become the face of the Howard Mansion investigation. "Detective Mercer, any new developments in the case?" A reporter called out. James offered a practiced smile. "We're pursuing strong leads. The department is committed to bringing the perpetrator to justice." Inside, Captain Wilson waved him into his office. "The commissioner's pleased with our progress. You're making the department look good, Mercer." "Thank you, sir." James couldn't remember the last time he'd received praise from his captain. "The press briefing is at 2. The commissioner will be there along with Councilman Howard. They're expecting an update." James nodded, though his stomach tightened. Despite the media attention, the case against Taylor remained thin. The lock-picking kit was circumstantial at best. The receipt found at the mansion hadn't yielded fingerprints. No stolen items had been recovered. "One more thing," Wilson added. "Internal Affairs is still poking around about those bias complaints. Keep this investigation by the book." Back at his desk, James stared at the evidence board. Taylor's face was now at the center, surrounded by red string and notes. The arrangement looked impressive, but the connections were mostly speculation. "We've got a problem," Ray said, dropping a folder on James's desk. Taylor's alibi checked out for the night of the robbery. 3 witnesses place him at a community meeting until after 10. James felt a flicker of panic. The robbery happened sometime between 8 and midnight. Maybe he went there after the meeting. "Maybe," Ray said, not sounding convinced. "But we need more than maybe to make charges stick." James opened the folder. The witness statements were clear and consistent. All 3 placed Taylor at the Oak Park Recreation Center until nearly 10:30 p.m., leading a discussion about neighborhood safety. "These witnesses," James said carefully, "they're all from Oak Park? Friends of his?" Ray frowned. 2 community volunteers and a church pastor. "Seems solid to me." "Keep digging," James insisted. "Everyone has secrets. Everyone has pressure points. After Ray left, James sat alone with his doubts. The case was unraveling, but he couldn't admit it. Not after the press conferences. Not after the commissioner's praise. Not after finally gaining the respect he'd craved for years. His phone buzzed with a text from the evidence technician. Partial print from the mansion matched another robbery last year. Not Taylor's, coming up to brief you. James quickly deleted the message. Then, making a decision that crossed a line he had once sworn never to cross, he didn't respond. Across town, Anthony Richards maintained his cover as Michael Taylor while meticulously documenting every aspect of the investigation against him. Each night he encrypted and transmitted updates to FBI headquarters. His handler was increasingly concerned. "They're building a case on nothing," Anthony whispered during their secure call. "False narrative, confirmation bias, ignored alibi witnesses, it's all here." "This is exactly the pattern we've been investigating," his handler replied. "But your safety comes first. We can pull you out, not yet. If I disappear now, they'll claim it proves guilt. Besides, I'm close to connecting the corruption to specific officers." After ending the call, Anthony reviewed his notes. Detective Mercer's fixation on him seemed personal. The detective's history showed a pattern of cases falling apart, promotions passed over. A man desperate for recognition, but Anthony had also identified something more concerning. Records showing Officer Brian Davis, the one who had initially confronted him at the community center, had been involved in multiple complaints of evidence tampering. More disturbing, Davis had partnered with 2 officers who later died in accidents after filing internal complaints. Anthony's investigation was expanding beyond racial bias to something potentially more sinister. If corrupt officers discovered his true identity, his life would be in danger. The next morning, Anthony arrived at the community center to find the windows broken and spray paint across the door. "Thief," in large red letters. Walter from the barbershop helped him board up the windows. "This ain't right. They got no proof, just running your name through the mud." "Thanks for the help," Anthony said, careful to stay in character while genuinely appreciating the support. "Community's behind you," Walter assured him. "People know a railroad job when they see one." Indeed, as the day progressed, neighborhood residents stopped by to help clean up. Some brought food. Others offered to stand guard. The community's response was heartening, but it also increased Anthony's guilt about his deception. These people believed they were defending an innocent community leader, which was true, but they didn't know his real purpose in their neighborhood. Meanwhile, Detective Mercer prepared for the press conference. His shirt was freshly pressed, his tie perfectly straight. On television, he projected confidence. Behind the scenes, he was scrambling. "The department has developed significant evidence linking Mr. Taylor to the robbery," he told the assembled reporters. "We believe the community center may have been established as a cover for criminal activity." "What evidence, specifically?" a reporter asked. "I can't detail everything during an ongoing investigation, but we've recovered tools consistent with the break-in method and established Mr. Taylor's presence near the crime scene." Councilman Howard, standing nearby, nodded approvingly. The commissioner clapped James on the shoulder. "Good work, detective." After the cameras stopped rolling, Captain Wilson pulled James aside. "Internal Affairs wants to review your case files tomorrow. Make sure everything's properly documented." That night, James sat alone in his apartment, surrounded by case notes. The whiskey bottle on his coffee table was half empty. On television, clips from the press conference played repeatedly. His face, his name, his case, everywhere. The recognition felt hollow now. His evidence wouldn't satisfy Internal Affairs, much less a jury. The partial fingerprint the lab had found didn't match Taylor, but he'd buried that report. The alibi witnesses were solid. Nothing stolen had been recovered. James was building a case against an innocent man, and the realization sickened him. Yet the alternative, admitting his mistake, losing his newfound status, becoming a cautionary tale in the department, seemed unbearable. His phone rang. "Ray, turn on Channel 8, his partner said without preamble. James fumbled for the remote. The screen showed live footage of a protest outside police headquarters. Dozens of Oak Park residents held signs reading "Free Michael Taylor" and "Evidence Not Racism." "It's getting bigger," Ray continued. "Community leaders are involved now. They're calling for an independent review of the investigation." James watched the crowd grow on screen. This wasn't supposed to happen. The case was supposed to be simple, clean. The hero detective catches the sophisticated thief. Instead, it was becoming a referendum on police practices. The next morning, James faced internal affairs. Lieutenant Karen Foster, a 20-year veteran with a reputation for thoroughness, reviewed his case files with an increasingly skeptical expression. Your probable cause for the search warrant was a receipt that could have been dropped by anyone, she noted. And these alibi witnesses, 3 respected community members, all confirm Mr. Taylor's whereabouts during the likely time of the robbery. The witnesses could be covering for him, James suggested weakly. A church pastor risking perjury? Foster raised an eyebrow. And this lab report about a partial print matching another suspect. Why wasn't this included in your briefing to the captain? James felt sweat beading on his forehead. Must have been filed after my last update. Foster's expression made clear she didn't believe him. Detective Mercer, this department is already under scrutiny for bias in investigations. This case isn't helping. After Foster left, Captain Wilson summoned James to his office. The captain's earlier approval had been replaced by thinly veiled anger. Internal Affairs is raising red flags about your case, Wilson said. The commissioner's concerned. Sir, I can explain. Fix it, Mercer. Either find solid evidence linking Taylor to the robbery, or start building a case against someone else. I won't have this department embarrassed. The message was clear. Solve the case correctly or become the scapegoat. Desperate, James decided to confront Taylor directly. Without informing Ray or getting proper authorization, he drove to the community center. The place was busy when he arrived. Children worked on homework at tables. Adults used computers for job searches, and Taylor moved among them, offering help and encouragement. It didn't look like a criminal enterprise. It looked exactly like what Taylor claimed it was, a resource for an underserved community. Detective Mercer. Taylor spotted him from across the room, his expression calm. How can I help you today? Need to ask you some questions. In private, they moved to a small office in the back. James closed the door and studied the man he'd been building a case against. Taylor showed no signs of nervousness. Your case is falling apart, Taylor said simply. You seem very confident for someone facing serious charges. Because I'm innocent. You know that now, don't you? James felt his careful facade cracking. What I know is that the Howard robbery was professional. Someone with training. Someone who appeared in this neighborhood right before the crime occurred. Someone who looks like me. Taylor's question hung in the air. You had tunnel vision, detective. Wanted a big case, needed a convenient suspect. It's not that simple, James insisted, though the words felt hollow, isn't it? Check my alibi. Check the evidence. You're building a case with nothing because it's easier than admitting you targeted the wrong person. Something in Taylor's confidence unsettled James. This wasn't the reaction of a guilty man caught in a lie. This was something else, almost as if Taylor wanted to be investigated. Who are you, really? James asked suddenly. A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed Taylor's face before his calm returned. Exactly who I appear to be. Someone trying to help this community. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside. They stepped from the office to see Officer Brian Davis and 3 other officers entering the community center. Michael Taylor, Davis announced loudly. You're under arrest for the robbery of Councilman Howard's residence. James stared in confusion. Officer Davis, I didn't authorize this arrest. Davis barely glanced at him. Authorization came from above, detective. Captain's orders. As Davis handcuffed Taylor, children in the center began crying. Community members shouted in protest. Phones recorded the scene. This isn't right, James said, but his objection was lost in the chaos. Anthony maintained his composure as he was led to the police car. This development was unexpected but not entirely surprising. His FBI training had prepared him for the possibility of arrest. What concerned him more was Officer Davis's involvement, the same officer he suspected of deeper corruption. As the car pulled away, Anthony caught a glimpse of Detective Mercer standing alone in the doorway of the community center, his expression troubled. For the first time, Anthony wondered if the detective was simply misguided rather than corrupt, a distinction that might prove important in the days ahead. At police headquarters, the booking process was quick and efficient. Anthony's fingerprints were taken, his personal belongings cataloged. He remained silent, knowing anything he said would be scrutinized. In a holding cell, he mentally reviewed emergency protocols. His FBI handler would already know of his arrest. Standard procedure would be to wait 24 hours before any intervention. During that time, Anthony needed to observe and gather information while protecting his cover. Meanwhile, James Mercer stormed into Captain Wilson's office. "Why was Taylor arrested without my authorization? I'm lead on this case." Wilson seemed unfazed. The commissioner wanted action. Officer Davis brought new evidence. What evidence? An anonymous tip led to a storage unit rented under a fake name. They found items from the Howard robbery inside. James felt his blood run cold. "That's convenient timing. Are you questioning a break in your own case, detective?" Wilson's tone was dangerous. "I want to see this storage unit. I want to interview this anonymous tipster. Davis is handling those aspects. You focus on preparing the case for the prosecutor." As James left the office, the pieces started falling into place. The sudden arrest. Evidence appearing out of nowhere. Davis taking over key elements of the investigation. It felt wrong because it was wrong. That night, against direct orders, James broke into the evidence room and examined the items allegedly found in the storage unit. The Ming Dynasty vase, the antique jewelry box, they matched the descriptions from Howard's insurance claim. But something wasn't right. James pulled the original crime scene photos. The dust patterns on the mansion shelves showed rectangular outlines where items had been removed. But the vase was round. The jewelry box was smaller than the dust outline. "They're fakes," he whispered to himself. "Planted evidence." As he replaced the evidence, James realized he had a choice to make. He could continue the charade, build a case on fabricated evidence, and keep his newfound status. Or he could dig deeper, risk everything, and discover the truth. For the first time in his career, the choice was clear. Whatever Michael. Taylor was hiding, and James was now certain he was hiding something. It didn't justify framing an innocent man for a crime he didn't commit. James left headquarters with a new determination. He would investigate Officer Davis and this mysterious evidence. He would discover why Taylor had been targeted, and he would find out who really robbed Councilman Howard's mansion. What he didn't realize was that his every move was now being watched. The deeper corruption Anthony had been investigating was about to reveal itself, with Detective James Mercer now caught in its dangerous currents. The holding cell was cold and damp. Anthony Richards, still maintaining his cover as Michael Taylor sat on the metal bench, his back against the wall. 36 hours had passed since his arrest. The FBI protocol would now be in motion, but Anthony needed to be patient. Breaking cover too soon could jeopardize years of work and potentially endanger his life. A guard appeared at the bars. "Taylor, visitor." In the visitation room, a middle-aged woman in a sharp suit waited. When the door closed, she spoke softly. "Agent Richards, I'm Special Agent Linda Chen, sent by Deputy Director Morrison." Anthony maintained his neutral expression, aware of potential surveillance. "Good to meet you, Counselor." Chen understood the caution. "I'll be representing you as your attorney. The Bureau is monitoring the situation. Your extraction is authorized if necessary, but headquarters prefers you maintain cover if possible." "They planted evidence," Anthony said quietly. "Storage unit with stolen items. Never been there in my life, we know. The unit was rented 2 days ago, paid in cash. Sloppy work. Officer Brian Davis is involved. He's connected to the suspicious deaths of whistleblower officers." Chen nodded. "We've updated your file. There's something else you should know. Detective Mercer has been asking questions about the evidence. Accessed the evidence room last night without authorization." This caught Anthony's attention. "Mercer? He started this witch hunt. Our analysis suggests he may have been manipulated. Recent signals indicate he's becoming suspicious of his own department." This development changed Anthony's calculations. A detective questioning his own investigation could become an asset, or a liability, if he exposed the FBI operation prematurely. "My preliminary hearing is tomorrow." "Yes, Judge Franklin Wells, he's fair, unlikely to be compromised." "I'll maintain cover," Anthony decided. "This may be our best opportunity to expose the broader corruption." Across town, Detective James Mercer was conducting his own unauthorized investigation. He'd called in sick, using the day to follow Officer Brian Davis without departmental knowledge. Davis made an unexpected stop at Councilman Howard's mansion. James watched from his car as the officer was immediately admitted through the front gate, unusual protocol for a standard follow-up visit. When Davis left 30 minutes later, James followed him to a small house in the suburbs, where he met with two other officers James recognized from the evidence room. The three spoke intently in the driveway before separating. That evening, James used his security clearance to access restricted personnel files. Officer Brian Davis had joined the department 8 years ago, with multiple commendations but also several excessive force complaints that had mysteriously disappeared. More concerning, Davis had been the first responder on 2 of the accidental deaths of officers who had filed internal complaints. The connection to Councilman Howard was also troubling. As chair of the Police Funding Committee, Howard controlled the department's budget and had personally advocated for the specialized tactical unit Davis belonged to. A pattern was emerging, but James needed more evidence. He drove to the storage facility where the stolen items had allegedly been found. The night manager was hesitant to talk until James flashed his badge. "The unit rented to Taylor. I need to see the paperwork." The manager pulled up the file. "Rented 10 days ago. Paid 6 months in advance, cash. Security footage? System was down that week for upgrades. Bad timing, huh?" James examined the rental agreement. The signature was clearly forged. Nothing like Taylor's handwriting on his community center documents. The listed address was Taylor's apartment, but the phone number was wrong. Who identified this unit as belonging to Taylor? Officer came in with a warrant. Knew exactly which unit to check. "Let me guess, Officer Brian Davis." The manager nodded. "That's him." James was now certain Taylor was being framed. But why? What had he done to deserve such focused attention? And why was Councilman Howard involved? The next morning, Detective Mercer arrived at the courthouse for Taylor's preliminary hearing. The media presence was substantial. Cameras lined the steps, reporters shouted questions. James ignored them all, his mind focused on the case's inconsistencies. In the courtroom, he was surprised to see Captain Wilson seated beside Councilman Howard in the gallery. Wilson frowned at James's appearance, clearly expecting him to be homesick. When Michael Taylor was led in, James studied him with new eyes. Taylor showed no signs of anxiety. His demeanor was composed, observant, almost analytical. He caught James's gaze and held it for a moment, his expression unreadable. District Attorney Patricia Morgan presented the case. "Your Honor, the evidence against Mr. Taylor is substantial. Items from the robbery were found in a storage unit rented in his name. His suspicious arrival in our city coincided with planning for this sophisticated crime. Taylor's attorney, the sharp-suited woman James didn't recognize, countered effectively. Your Honor, the evidence is not just circumstantial, it's fabricated. The storage unit was rented after my client was already a person of interest. The signature is an obvious forgery. Multiple witnesses confirm Mr. Taylor's alibi for the night in question. Judge Wells reviewed the documents carefully. Ms. Morgan, the timeline troubles me. Why wasn't this storage unit discovered in the initial investigation?" The DA shifted uncomfortably. "An anonymous tip led officers to the location. Convenient timing," the judge noted. "And the chain of custody for these items?" "Officer Brian Davis secured the evidence, Your Honor." James watched Taylor and his attorney exchange a quick glance. Something in their silent communication struck him as professional, practiced. Judge Wells seemed equally troubled by the evidence. "I'm setting bail at $50,000. Further, I'm ordering an independent review of all evidence in this case." As Taylor was led out, James made a decision. He approached Taylor's attorney in the hallway. "I need 5 minutes with your client." The woman assessed him coolly. "Detective Mercer, the man who started this witch hunt. I believe your client was framed. I can help prove it." A flicker of surprise crossed her face. "Why the change of heart?" "Because something's wrong with this case. With my department, I need to know what Taylor knows." After a moment's consideration, she nodded. "I'll arrange it. But understand this, if you're playing some angle, it won't end well for you." The threat was delivered with such quiet confidence that James felt a chill. This was no ordinary defense attorney. An hour later, James sat across from Taylor in a conference room at the county jail. No recording devices, no observers. A courtesy rarely afforded, but granted after Taylor's attorney made several calls. "Detective Mercer," Taylor began, "This is unexpected. The evidence against you was planted," James said without preamble. "The storage unit, the items, all of it. Officer Davis is involved. Possibly Captain Wilson, and somehow Councilman Howard is connected." Taylor studied him carefully. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I started this mess. I put your name out there because I needed a win. I was wrong, and now you're paying for my mistake. And if helping me cost you your badge?" The question was direct, challenging. James had been asking himself the same thing. Then I lose my badge. But I don't lose myself. The words felt true as he spoke them. Taylor leaned forward. "What do you know about the officers who died? The ones who filed complaints?" The question caught James off guard. 3 officers in the last 2 years, all ruled accidents. Why? Start there. Look at their complaint files. Who they accused, what they found. "You know something about those cases?" James asked. Taylor's expression revealed nothing. "I know that nothing in your department happens in isolation. The corruption goes deeper than a single framed robbery suspect." As James left the jail, his mind raced with possibilities. Taylor knew more than he was saying, far more. The man's interest in the dead officers suggested a connection James hadn't considered. That night, James used his access codes to review the sealed files of the deceased officers. Each had filed internal complaints about evidence tampering and racial profiling. Each had specifically named Officer Brian Davis and his tactical unit. And each had died before their complaints could be fully investigated. The pattern was clear, but James still couldn't understand the connection to Councilman Howard or why Taylor had been targeted. He needed more information. Returning to the Howard Mansion robbery file, James meticulously reviewed every document, every photograph, every statement. Something had been bothering him about the case from the beginning, the sophistication of the break-in. The security system had been bypassed expertly. The most valuable items had been selected with knowledge of art and antiquities. Then he saw it, a detail he'd missed before. In the background of a crime scene photo, barely visible on Councilman Howard's desk, an insurance policy adjustment dated 1 week before the robbery, increasing coverage on specific items. The same items that were stolen. It was an insurance scam, James whispered. The next piece fell into place. An officer involved in evidence tampering would be the perfect accomplice for a fake robbery. Howard could report items stolen, collect insurance, and keep the originals hidden away. Davis could ensure the investigation went nowhere, or better yet, pin it on a convenient scapegoat. But that still didn't explain why Taylor had been chosen as the fall guy. What made him the perfect target? James needed to speak with Taylor again, but a visit now would raise suspicions. Instead, he drove to the Oak Park Community Center, hoping to find clues in Taylor's workspace. The center was closed, still bearing the thief graffiti across the door, but Walter from the barbershop spotted him. "Police still harassing the neighborhood?" Walter called out. James showed his badge. "Just following up on some questions." Walter crossed his arms. "Man's already in jail for something he didn't do." "What more you want?" "I'm trying to help prove his innocence," James said, surprised by how easily the truth came out. Walter's hostility softened slightly. "You serious?" "Yes, I think he was set up and I need to understand why." "Did Taylor ever mention problems with Officer Davis? Or Councilman Howard?" Walter considered the question. Taylor asked a lot of questions about police in the neighborhood, documented complaints, kept records of patrol patterns. Why would a community center director do that? Said he was helping people know their rights. Building cases for a possible lawsuit against the department. This new information shifted James's understanding. If Taylor had been building evidence of police misconduct, he would have been a natural target for corrupt officers. Did he keep these records at the center? Walter shook his head. Man was careful. Said he had a secure system. Wouldn't tell me details. James thanked Walter and left, but as he reached his car, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Captain Wilson, Mercer. "My office now. We need to discuss your unauthorized activities." James's stomach tightened. His investigation had been discovered. As he drove to headquarters, he weighed his options. If Wilson was involved in the corruption, confronting him was dangerous. But running would only make James look guilty. The station was unusually quiet when he arrived. Wilson's office door was closed, blinds drawn. James knocked. "Enter." Inside, James found not just Captain Wilson but also Officer Brian Davis and Councilman Howard. The atmosphere was tense, hostile. "Detective Mercer," Wilson said coldly. "Officer Davis tells me you've been asking questions about his evidence handling. Just being thorough, sir. And accessing sealed files of deceased officers?" Davis added, "Visiting the prisoner without authorization?" James realized they'd been monitoring him. "I have concerns about the case against Taylor." "Your concerns are noted," Wilson said. "But this case is no longer your responsibility. You're being placed on administrative leave pending a review of your conduct," Howard spoke up. "The department needs officers who follow the chain of command, Detective, not rogue elements who undermine important investigations." The threat was clear. James was being removed from the investigation and possibly being set up himself. "My badge and gun, sir?" James placed them on the desk, his mind racing for a way out of the situation. Wilson nodded to Davis. "Officer Davis will escort you from the building." As Davis led him through the station, James noticed other officers watching with curious expressions. Word of his suspension had spread quickly. No one intervened. In the parking garage, Davis spoke quietly. "You should have stayed in your lane, Mercer. The Taylor case was working for everyone. Now you're making the same mistake those dead officers made." The threat was unmistakable. James's investigation had put him in danger, the same danger that had claimed 3 other officers' lives. "Is that what happened to them?" James asked. "They discovered you were working with Howard?" Davis's expression hardened. "Accidents happen, Mercer. Remember that." After Davis left, James sat in his car, weighing his options. He was now a target of the same corrupt system he'd unknowingly served. His career was effectively over. But he still had one advantage. Davis, Wilson, and Howard didn't know how much he'd discovered. James drove directly to the courthouse where he knew Taylor's attorney would be filing motions. He found her leaving the building. "Detective Mercer, you look troubled. I need to talk to Taylor again. It's urgent." She studied his face. "You're not wearing your badge. I've been suspended. They know I'm investigating Davis and Howard." Something in her demeanor shifted, a decision being made. "Follow me." "Don't use your phone." She led him to a coffee shop 2 blocks away. After ordering drinks, she spoke quietly. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I've lost everything trying to fix my mistake," James replied honestly. "And because I think your client knows exactly what's happening in my department." She made a call, speaking in what sounded like code. After hanging up, she wrote an address on a napkin. "Go there at 8 tonight. Knock 3 times, pause, then twice more. Tell them Linda sent you." "What is this place?" "A safe house. If you're being honest about wanting to help Taylor, go there. If not, we never had this conversation." As she left, James realized he was crossing a line from which there would be no return. His career, his reputation, perhaps even his freedom. All were now at risk. That night, as he approached the nondescript house in a quiet suburb, James felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in his career, he was absolutely certain he was doing the right thing. He knocked as instructed, 3 times, paused 2 more. After a moment, the door opened. Inside waited Michael. Taylor, looking remarkably composed for a man who should have been in jail along with his, attorney and 2 other serious-looking individuals. "Detective Mercer," Taylor said. "I believe it's time we had an honest conversation." One of the strangers placed a badge on the table. "FBI. My name is Special Agent Anthony Richards," Taylor continued. "And I need your help to bring down the corruption in your department." James stared in shock as the pieces finally came together. The careful documentation, the professional demeanor, the perfect cover story. He wasn't looking at Michael Taylor, community organizer. He was looking at an undercover FBI agent, and everything James thought he knew about the case, about his department, about his own career, was about to change. James Mercer stood frozen in the doorway of the safe house, his world tilting on its axis. The man he had publicly accused of robbery, the man whose life he had nearly destroyed for his own career advancement, was an FBI agent. "Please, detective, come in." Anthony Richards, not Michael Taylor, gestured to an empty chair. "We have a lot to discuss." James stepped inside, noticing the sophisticated surveillance equipment, multiple laptops and case files spread across a table. This was clearly a fully operational FBI field office disguised as a suburban home. James struggled to form words. How are you here? You were in county lockup this morning. Anthony smiled slightly. The Bureau has resources. Let's leave it at that. Special Agent Linda Chen, who James now realized was definitely not a defense attorney, closed the door. Detective Mercer has been suspended. Davis, Wilson, and Howard know he's investigating them, which means we're accelerating our timeline, Anthony said. Detective Mercer, you need to understand what you've stumbled into. Over the next hour, Anthony explained the FBI's year-long investigation into the Metro Police Department. The Bureau had identified patterns of civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and potentially the murder of officers who threatened to expose corruption. 3 officers died in accidents after filing internal complaints, Anthony explained, spreading photographs across the table. Officer Brian Davis was connected to each case, but we believe he's working for someone with more influence. Councilman Howard, James said, the pieces falling into place. Howard chairs the police funding committee, but his influence goes deeper, Chen added. His family has controlled city development contracts for generations. The tactical unit that Davis leads provides security for Howard's less public business interests, including a smuggling operation for stolen art and antiquities. Anthony continued. The mansion robbery wasn't just an insurance scam. It was covering the transfer of items that had already been sold on the black market. James felt sick, and I helped them by providing a convenient scapegoat. You were manipulated, Anthony acknowledged. Your eagerness for recognition made you useful to them. When you started questioning the evidence, you became a liability. Davis threatened me today, said I could have an accident like the others. Anthony nodded grimly. You're not safe returning to your apartment. They'll be watching it. So what now? James asked. Now we use their frame-up attempt to our advantage, Anthony replied. We've been building this case for nearly a year, but your actions accidentally created an opportunity to expose everything at once. The third FBI agent, who had been quietly monitoring communications, spoke up. Deputy Director has greenlit Operation Clean House. We move tomorrow. Anthony turned to James. We need your help, Detective. You have knowledge of department procedures, personnel, and locations that would take us weeks to develop independently. You want me to help the FBI bring down my own department? Officers I've worked with for years? No, Anthony said firmly. We want you to help save your department by removing the cancer that's destroying it. Most of your colleagues are good officers being led by corrupt commanders. James thought of the honest officers he knew, the ones who joined for the right reasons, who deserved better leadership. What do you need from me? Anthony nodded approvingly. First, we need detailed information about security protocols, shift schedules, and access points at headquarters. Then we need you to wear a wire. For the next several hours, James provided everything he knew about department operations. Floor plans, security camera locations, door codes. He identified officers loyal to Davis and those who might be trusted. By dawn, Operation Clean House was ready to launch. Your role is crucial, Anthony explained as a technician fitted James with a hidden recording device. Return to headquarters. Tell Wilson you've reconsidered your position. Say you want to rejoin the investigation. We need you to get Davis and Wilson talking about the case, ideally with Howard present. They'll be suspicious, James pointed out. Use your suspension as leverage, Linda suggested. Tell them you've realized your career depends on being a team player. Mention financial pressures, child support, mortgage. Make it believable that you're choosing self-interest. James nodded, remembering how his own desperation had led him down a compromised path once before. It would be easy to convince Wilson he was making that choice again. While you're inside, our teams will execute search warrants at Howard's properties and Davis's residence, Anthony continued. We'll also secure the evidence room to prevent destruction of materials. As morning light filtered through the windows, James felt a strange clarity. His career as he knew it was over, but perhaps something better could take its place. Something honest. I'm ready, he said. Anthony offered his hand. For what it's worth, Mercer, turning back from the brink takes courage. Not everyone would make the choice you're making now. 2 hours later, James walked into police headquarters. Colleagues glanced at him with mixtures of curiosity and wariness. His suspension had become common knowledge. Captain Wilson looked surprised when James knocked on his office door. Mercer, you're on administrative leave. I know, sir. That's why I'm here. I've been doing some thinking. Wilson gestured to a chair. I'm listening. James took a deep breath, aware of the recording device capturing every word. I made a mistake questioning the Taylor case. I was confused, stressed about money problems. But I've realized my place is with the department. Wilson studied him skeptically. That's quite a change from yesterday. Losing my badge was a wake-up call. I have child support payments, underwater mortgage. James looked down, playing the part of a desperate man. I can't afford principals right now. Wilson's expression softened slightly. We all face practical realities, Mercer. I want back on the Taylor case. I'll handle it however you and Officer Davis think best. Wilson picked up his phone. Brian, come to my office. Bring the Howard file. After hanging up, he turned back to James. If you're serious about this, there's a place for you. The department takes care of loyal officers. Officer Davis arrived minutes later, his expression hardening at the sight of James. What's he doing here? Detective Mercer has had a change of heart, Wilson explained. He wants to rejoin the Taylor investigation. Davis remained suspicious. After all the questions he's been asking? His unauthorized snooping? I made a mistake, James said, meeting Davis's gaze. I forgot who I really work for. The implication hung in the air. Not the public, not the law, but the corrupt system that protected its own. Davis exchanged a look with Wilson. We should include Howard in this conversation. 20 minutes later, Councilman Howard arrived, closing the office door firmly behind him. Detective Mercer, I understand you've reconsidered your position. Yes, sir. I recognize the importance of departmental unity. Howard smiled thinly. Good. The Taylor prosecution needs to proceed smoothly. Too many questions would be inconvenient. I've been wondering about something, James said carefully. The missing items from your home, were they as valuable as reported? Howard's smile didn't waver. Insurance valuations are often generous. Let's just say the settlement will be quite satisfactory. And Taylor? He was convenient, being new to the neighborhood? Davis interrupted. Enough questions. Either you're with us or you're not, Mercer. I'm with you, James assured him. I just want to understand how things work. For next time. Wilson leaned forward. There's a system to these things, Mercer. Certain investigations go a certain way. Certain evidence gets found or doesn't get found. It's how the department functions efficiently. Like the evidence against Taylor? James pressed. Evidence appears when needed, Davis said flatly. The storage unit was a clean solution. Taylor's background made him perfect. No real connections here, working in a neighborhood with a history of not cooperating with police. And the judge is handling his part? James asked. Howard nodded. Judge Rosenberg takes over the case tomorrow. He understands departmental priorities, unlike Judge Wells. And the officers who didn't understand departmental priorities? James asked, thinking of the 3 dead whistleblowers. The ones who had accidents? A dangerous silence fell over the room. Accidents happen to people who don't drive carefully, Davis said coldly. Remember that, Mercer. The threat hung in the air, captured perfectly by the recording device. I understand, James said. So what's our next step with Taylor? Howard checked his watch. I have a meeting with the DA in an hour. Taylor will plead to a reduced charge. 5 years out in 3 with good behavior. Clean resolution, no messy trial. But he's innocent, James said, unable to stop himself. Howard's expression hardened. Innocence is a legal finding, Detective. Taylor will be found guilty because that outcome serves the greater good of this department and this city, just as those officers had accidents because it served the greater good. Wilson nodded in agreement. The department comes first, Mercer. Everything else is secondary. The confession was clear, unambiguous, and recorded. James felt a mixture of triumph and disgust. At that moment, the office door burst open. FBI agents in tactical gear flooded in, weapons drawn. FBI! Everyone on the ground! Hands where we can see them! The shock on Wilson's face transformed to rage as he realized what had happened. You wore a wire? You're dead, Mercer. As agents handcuffed Wilson, Davis, and Howard, Anthony Richards entered the office, now dressed in full FBI tactical gear, his badge prominently displayed. Brian Davis, John Wilson, Richard Howard, you're under arrest for civil rights violations, evidence tampering, conspiracy, and accessory to murder. Howard struggled against the handcuffs. This is outrageous. Do you know who I am? A criminal, Anthony replied simply. One who's been using the police department as his personal enforcement squad. Throughout headquarters, similar scenes played out as FBI agents arrested officers connected to the corruption. Evidence was seized, computers confiscated, files secured. In the aftermath, James sat in an empty conference room, his service weapon and badge still gone, his future uncertain. Anthony joined him, setting down 2 cups of coffee. "You did good work today, Mercer. Doesn't feel that way?" "I helped destroy the department's reputation." "No," Anthony corrected. "You helped save it. The officers being arrested are the ones who destroyed its reputation. The good ones now have a chance to rebuild. What happens now?" "The Bureau has a standing task force on police corruption. They could use someone with your inside knowledge and your newfound commitment to doing things right." James looked up, surprised. "You're offering me a job? After what I did to you?" Anthony shrugged. "You made a mistake. Then you risked everything to correct it. That says more about your character than the mistake itself." Through the conference room windows, James could see FBI agents leading Howard away in handcuffs, reporters capturing every moment. The power structure that had defined his career was crumbling before his eyes. "I'll need time to think about it," James said finally. "Of course, but consider this. Sometimes the best way to fix a broken system is from the outside." 3 months later, the Oak Park Community Center reopened under new leadership. The thief graffiti had been painted over, replaced by a colorful mural created by neighborhood children. Walter from the barbershop cut the ceremonial ribbon, speaking to the assembled crowd. "This center represents our community's resilience. When they tried to use this place to frame an innocent man, they didn't realize they were actually giving us a gathering point for change." The crowd applauded. Among them stood James Mercer, now wearing the subtle badge of an FBI analyst assigned to the Police Integrity Task Force. The investigation had revealed the full extent of the corruption. 12 officers had been arrested. Captain Wilson and Officer Davis were facing multiple charges, including conspiracy in the deaths of the whistleblower officers. Councilman Howard's empire had collapsed as evidence of bribery, money laundering, and art smuggling came to light. After the ceremony, James approached Walter. "Place looks good. Better than ever," Walter agreed. "Your friend Taylor, or whatever his real name is, did right by this neighborhood. He was just doing his job. Maybe, but he cared about this place too. You could see it." James nodded, understanding that Anthony's cover identity had been built on genuine connection to the community he was trying to protect. As the celebration continued, James received a text message. "Operation Clean House final report submitted today. Thought you'd want to know." James smiled slightly. Anthony had returned to FBI headquarters weeks ago. Their unlikely partnership concluded. But the message reminded James that his new path had started with a mistake, and the courage to make it right. The Oak Park Community Center stood as a testament to that journey, a place once used in an attempt to frame an innocent man, now serving as a genuine resource for the community. Outside, James noticed a plaque beside the entrance, recently installed. It read simply, "Justice is not merely the absence of corruption, but the active pursuit of truth." Words to live by, James thought, as he rejoined the celebration of a neighborhood, finally receiving the justice it deserved. In the months and years that followed, the Metro Police Department underwent a painful but necessary transformation. New leadership, new training, new accountability measures. James Mercer continued his work with the FBI, using his experience to help other departments avoid similar patterns of corruption. And somewhere across the country, Special Agent Anthony Richards prepared for his next undercover assignment, carrying with him the lessons of Oak Park, how systems fail, how people can change, and how justice, though sometimes delayed, eventually finds its way into the light.